Hey everyone, my name is Ben Russell, and I'm honored to be able to share a session with you today just talking about what is campus ministry, just talking through some practical ways of reaching local schools. Well, the first thing we need to do is if we're going to talk about campus ministry is clearly define what is campus ministry. Well, I believe that campus ministry is literally taking our youth ministry as youth leaders to the local schools. A lot of times we'll have Wednesday night outreaches or Friday night outreaches, and we want students to be drawn to our church, to our youth service, and those things are great. But sometimes we have to think outside the box and take our youth ministry to the local schools. And that's what I believe that campus ministry truly is. We have to look through the lens in our youth ministry of what it might be to an unchurched student from one of our local schools. If we look through the lens of what they may see, I believe we will do youth ministry a lot more effectively to keep in mind what that person may think about our youth ministry from the time they pull their car or they're dropped off in the parking lot of our youth ministry or of our church. Everything that we do at our church and our youth ministry is communicating something. So what are we communicating to that person? I think if we'll look through that lens more on Wednesday nights, we'll be a lot more effective. And if we're not really doing campus ministry as youth leaders, I feel like we're not doing the full scope of youth ministry the way that we're supposed to be doing it. If we're only trying to reach students within the four walls of our church, we're just not doing it the right way. We have to take our youth ministry to the local schools. Well, I want to talk through a few different ideas of how we can do that. First thing is prayer. I know prayer sounds kind of simple, and if we're not careful, we'll overlook prayer a lot. But why should we pray for God to open those doors? Well, the first thing is that we know that God answers prayers. So if we want to reach these local schools, we need to ask God to help us. The second thing, the second reason we should make prayer the number one way that we're reaching our local schools is we know that prayer keeps us focused on the mission. Prayer keeps us focused on the mission. So how are some ways that we can pray for our local schools? Well, one thing we can do is have a school of the week, maybe on a Wednesday night youth service. When I youth pastor, we had a school of the week every Wednesday night. I prayed specifically for that school on the microphone, and we rotated those around every single week. That's one way we can pray for our local schools. The church I attend right now is every Sunday in the bulletin there's a school of the week there. So every day of the week there's adults praying and calling out that school. So that's one way we can do. And another way we can do is encourage our students from our youth ministries to pray over their lunch. It sounds simple, but we really need to encourage these guys. Just take a few seconds, bow their head, and say a prayer. Man, they got to take that stand for Christ. Another way we could talk about praying for our schools is something we encourage here in Alabama, is that's doing a prayer walk at our school. Maybe on a Saturday, we have a handful of students and maybe a few leaders, a few key leaders, and we go and we walk around that school and we're praying God's protection over that school. We're praying that God's love and grace and mercy through our Christian students will be shown at that school. We pray for our administrators. We pray for our teachers, our coaches, everybody in that school. I would encourage you to organize a prayer walk at a local high school or junior high on a Saturday. Watch what God will do. Watch what doors will open up through those ways. The second thing we can do, and we're talking about campus ministry, is empower our students to be the light that God has called them to be. Now, I'm with the Assemblies of God, and one thing that we like to encourage is what we call campus missionaries. And you don't have to be the Assemblies of God to be a campus missionary, but that's one thing within the ministry of Youth Alive, which I'm involved with. We encourage students to be a campus missionary. A campus missionary is a student that shares Jesus at school. So we have to empower our students. We have to present that mission to them. If you want to take the spiritual temperature of the students in your youth ministry, take it while they're at school. That'll give you a pretty accurate read where they are. We know we've heard this said a lot, but we know that you're either a missionary to where God's called you or you're part of the mission field. Same thing with students. You're either a missionary to your school or you're still part of the mission field. So if a student, and I tell students all the time, if a student isn't truly following Jesus at school, they're not really following him. But our students must be empowered. So how can we coach our students to be the light that God has called them to be? Well, maybe it is being a campus missionary. Maybe it's encouraging them to to be that light that God's called them to be. But how do we coach them? What's that look like for you? Is it meeting with them every single week? Is it having a group of what you would call campus missionaries, and maybe you meet them at your house? Maybe it's a specific Sunday school class. When I youth pastored, we met with we called them CMs. Before Wednesday night youth service, we always met with our CMs every single week and encourage them and have a devotion with them and pray over them. But it's not a specific program. It's a broad principle that really you have to adapt to your youth ministry. But how can you empower students in youth ministry to reach their schools? How can you coach them? Is it meeting with them? Is it taking them through a track, a growth track? Whatever that is for you, empower them. If we can empower our students, they're there every single day. We can pop in and we can have lunch and we can be at a football game or a basketball game, but they're there every single day. So we have to, as youth leaders, it's up to us to coach our students to be empowered to reach their campus. Well, the third thing to talk to you about, we hit prayer, we hit student empowerment, student networking. A lot of people would call that the establishment of a club. Sometimes, even though we know a student has to be the one that starts the club and runs the club, as youth leaders, we have to kind of be that person that kind of gives them that push sometimes, or helps them get organized, help them find a teacher sponsor. That's the student networking element of campus ministry. A club, maybe it's a prayer club, maybe it's a traditional Bible club at the school. Whatever it is, let's encourage our students to network there. Let's make sure that our students are prepared. For instance, there's a Students' Bill of Rights that can be accessed. If you Google that, it'll pop right up. You can go on the Youth Alive site and pull that up, yausa.com. It's the equal access right is on there as well. There are parts about meeting with the principal. All these things that we can pull from to help students have a ministry, a club, so to speak. Let's help them make sure it's not boring. I know when I was in school, I didn't want to go to a boring club. I wouldn't have gone. I didn't go. But how can we help them make it a little bit more effective? Is it bringing food? Is it playing some music before and after? Whatever that might look like. Let's make sure there's speakers brought in. Let's make sure that there's structure, if you will, to the club. So we talk about prayer. We talk about student empowerment. We talk about student networking. And then finally, we can talk about outreach a little bit. Outreach does still a broad part of campus ministry. It's connecting your community to share Jesus. Now, what we do school assemblies with called the 7 Project, and we invite students to do a come back to a night event where we share the gospel with them after a school assembly at their high school. But what can you do for outreach? Let's talk a few of those really quick. If we're trying to take our youth ministry to the local school, maybe it's something as small as you show up the first day of school from your church, and every teacher has possibly a gift from your church, a small gift. Maybe it's a Starbucks card, maybe it's something small, maybe it's a little gift basket, but you're just showing them appreciation. That is outreach. That is taking youth ministry to the schools. Maybe your youth ministry would like to adopt a school that for an entire school year, although you're trying to reach every school that you are pulling from, but one specific school, maybe your church adopts. Maybe you ask them if there's anything they could use financially. Maybe it's if your church purchased them new basketball uniforms, new football uniforms. You'd be shocked what schools are in need of right now. Maybe your youth ministry volunteers for after a football game. You've asked the principal if your youth ministry can help clean up the bleachers. We know a lot of times the band members have to do that, but how awesome would it be if our youth ministry encouraged all of our students to stay after the football game and clean up? There's all kind of things you can do. It's outreach driven. It's not all about just a school assembly or something like that, but what can you do to help take your youth ministry to the local school? Maybe it's you're doing a teacher appreciation banquet. You could host it at your church even though it's in your church and not the school. You're still inviting all the teachers, maybe coaches, administrators, and you just do what we call a teacher appreciation banquet. It costs them nothing to go to. Maybe it lasts 1 hour. There's no gimmicks. There's no, hey, come to our church this Sunday. It's just a simple, for this middle school, we want to do you a steak dinner, a chicken dinner, whatever it might be. You're taking your youth ministry to the local school. All these things are outreach. So outside of the normal thinking, what can you do to take your youth ministry to the school? That's what I would encourage you to do. Think outside the box. What can you do to bless teachers, students. What if on Valentine's Day you came outside of school and you got permission to be there and you just gave students just a little gift on Valentine's Day that talked about love or whatever? Our home church here has done that. So many ideas. You can clean a locker room. You can repaint a hallway of a school. You can help do landscape. Your church can go to the school, volunteer to help do the landscape during the spring, pull weeds. What can you do to help bless your school? Well, finally, I want to give you just a few resources as you move forward. I did mention Youth Alive, and so I want to mention our website one more time to you. That's yausa.com, yausa.com. Tons of campus ministry ideas there. I'd also encourage you to check out Dare to Share, their website, Dare to Share. If you'll Google that, it'll come right up. Great evangelism when it talks about schools, things like that would be fantastic for you to pull from. And then everyschool.com, everyschool.com, another fantastic resource you guys could pull from to talk about campus ministry. So when you're talking about youth ministry, you're talking about campus ministry, it's blending those two things together. You're talking about prayer, you're talking about student empowerment, student networking, and outreach. What can you do to bless the schools in your area? So I want to encourage you to make this a journey, make this a process, make campus ministry the DNA, part of the DNA of your youth ministry. Thank you so much for your time today. God bless you.